I heard it before I even stepped off the porch. That sharp, clipped laugh that never meant joy, only mockery. It sliced through the quiet like a knife on metal, clean and cruel. Honestly, why does she still insist on showing up? She's barely part of us anymore. Another voice followed, light, careless, the kind people use when they forget you have ears, a heart, a history. I stopped behind the door, my fingers wrapped around the warm casserole dish. Peter's recipe. My late husband's Sunday roast bake. His comfort, his pride. The dish everyone used to beg me to make. But today, it suddenly felt like a leftover memory I was forcing into a place that no longer had room for me. I inhaled, lifted my chin, and pushed the door open. The hallway didn't smell like home. Not my daughter's home. No, this smelled like those expensive candles people buy to impress the guests they actually care about. Voices spilled from the living room. Laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of cheerful noise that tells you very clearly. You weren't expected. You weren't missed. When Elisa saw me, her smile stretched thin. The kind of smile you used to be polite, not welcoming. Miriam, you didn't say you were coming. I wasn't asked, I said quietly, stepping inside anyway. But I brought dinner. No one reached for the dish. For a moment, I stood there holding it like some old relic no one wanted. My son Daniel lifted a hand in a half-hearted greeting. "Hi, Mom," he said, his eyes already drifting back to someone else. The room was full, neighbors, cousins, people who had eaten at my table for years. But not one person stood up. Not one face softened. I placed the dish down next to their artisanal cheeses and bread that cost more than my electricity bill. My food looked like it came from a different world. Maybe I did too. I sat on the far end of the couch, straight-backed, hands folded, the way you sit when you're trying not to occupy too much space. Trying not to be in the way. Trying not to feel. My grandson ran past me chasing a balloon. He didn't even glance at me. Once upon a time, he would have jumped straight into my lap before touching a single toy. Now, I was a chair in the corner. A lamp. Something that existed without matching. Later, Daniel lifted his glass and toasted to family. Everyone cheered. Everyone except the one person who had quietly given up pieces of her life. Her jewelry, her sleep, her body, for that very family. He didn't look at me. He didn't mention me. It was as if the woman who raised him wasn't even in the room. When the party thinned out and the laughter slowed, Elisa walked over with that stiff smile of hers. "Would you like something to drink?" "There. Water." "No, vive." "Thank you." Her relief was instant. Sharp. Unhidden. "All right. Make yourself comfortable." Comfortable. In a house where my pictures had quietly disappeared. Where my chair had been pushed into a corner. Where I had become a shadow walking through someone else's life. I helped clean up anyway, plates, cups, tables, like muscle memory. Like duty. Like a woman who still wanted to belong. No one said thank you. No one even turned my way. When I finally stepped out the door, Daniel called after me. "Drive safe, Mom." Not "come back soon." Not "I'm glad you came." Just "drive safe." Like you'd say to a stranger who stumbled into the wrong event. Outside, the cold wind blurred my eyes, but I wasn't crying. Not yet. I held the empty casserole dish close, still warm. The only thing in that house that remembered me. The only thing that felt like it still belonged to me. I didn't leave hurt. I didn't leave angry. I left deciding. The next morning, in the quiet of my kitchen, with a single cup of coffee warming my hands, I whispered to myself. Soft, steady, final. I will not be the one waiting at the door anymore. But the decision Miriam made that morning, it would change her entire family. The morning after the party, a strange stillness settled over my home. Not loneliness. Not even sadness. Something sharper. Like the breath right before a storm decides it won't hold itself together anymore. I sat at the kitchen table with my single cup of coffee. The mug Peter bought me decades ago at a roadside inn. For the world's bravest woman. Back then I laughed at it. Back then bravery meant climbing ladders to clean windows, or hosting dinners for 20 people. Today, bravery meant something else. Today it felt like a prophecy. The house hummed with old memories. Daniel's worksheet spread across this very table. Paint splatters from his 7-year-old. "I'll be a great artist someday." And the dent in the hallway from the scooter. He crashed while I pretended not to panic. Every corner whispered a life I had held together with two tired hands. Echoes. All of them echoes. I opened the drawer I had avoided for years. Inside it lay a folder swollen with papers that carried the weight of every sacrifice I had excused, every boundary I had erased for the sake of family. Bank transfers. Loan statements. Receipts from the times Daniel and Elisa needed just a little help. And then, the one document that tightened my throat. Property transfer agreement. My handwriting stared back at me, steady, hopeful, naive. I, Miriam Clark, willingly contribute $58,000 toward the down payment. I remembered the day I signed it. Elisa's warm hug, sweet at the time, sour now. Daniel's voice saying, "You're saving our future, Mom." Funny. They saved their future by forgetting mine. I closed the folder slowly, almost gently, like setting down the past. Then I picked up the phone. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Warm but edged with curiosity. "Miriam? Well, isn't this a surprise?" "Hello, Sylvia," I said, steadying myself. "I need legal advice." Sylvia Hayes had been my neighbor for 10 years. Retired estate lawyer. A woman with a backbone made of pure steel and a heart that didn't tolerate nonsense. We used to play cards, until Daniel hinted she was putting ideas in my head. "Bring everything," she said. "And come before noon. My brain refuses paperwork after lunch." I actually smiled. Really smiled. Before leaving my house, I paused in the hallway. Only then did I notice. The pictures were gone. The ones I had slowly packed away because the faces in them grew distant. And so did I. Without knowing it, I had already started letting go. Sylvia's home smelled like lavender and lemon polish. Her cat, Murphy, shot me a look like I owed him rent. Books towered on every shelf. She scanned my documents with a seriousness that made my palms sweat. Page after page, her expression tightened. "You gave them the money as a gift," she said finally. "Yes. And they've treated you like, well, not family." I swallowed hard. That was kinder than the truth. "You can't reclaim the house," she continued softly. "But you can reclaim your autonomy." "My autonomy?" I echoed like the word belonged to someone else. She leaned back in her chair, eyes sharp but kind. "Miriam, you've been orbiting around people who stopped valuing your gravity a long time ago." The words struck deep, clean, painful, honest. "You can change your will," she said. "Your power of attorney. Your beneficiaries. Everything that hands them control they have not earned." I blinked. "You mean, I can?" "Not only can," she said firmly, sliding a checklist toward me. "You should." I held the edge of her table like it might steady me. The truth, the simple truth, settled into my bones. She touched my hand once. "You're not ruining a relationship, Miriam. You're correcting a mistake." Something inside me, something small but stubborn, something I thought life had worn down, lifted its head. I folded the checklist and slipped it into my purse. And when I left Sylvia's house, the air outside felt different. Lighter. Braver. At home, I took a blank sheet of paper, wrote Daniel at the top, and drew a line straight through it. Not to erase him. Never to erase him. To release myself. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without waiting for a phone call. That was never going to come. Without guilt. Without fear. Without the old ache of being forgotten. Just peace. Because the next day, Miriam would make a choice her family never imagined. A choice that would shake the very ground they walked on. The next morning arrived gray and heavy. The kind of gray that doesn't just sit in the sky. It listens. Clouds hung low, like they had leaned in to witness whatever I was about to do. I didn't mind. Gray has a way of sharpening decisions. I woke before sunrise, brewed tea instead of coffee, and spread Sylvia's checklist across the kitchen table. The paper looked so small, almost harmless. Too simple for the weight it carried. Revoke power of attorney. Remove Daniel from financial access. Update will and beneficiaries. Secure personal documents. Change house locks. My eyes lingered on the last one. Change the locks. I hadn't expected those 3 words to hit so hard. Daniel still had a key. Elisa too. They never used it, but they could. At any time. No warning. No boundaries. A grain of sand lodged itself in my chest. Not anymore. At 9 a.m., I called a locksmith. Emergency or scheduled, ma'am? The man asked. Neither, I said. Then after a breath. Just necessary. He arrived an hour later. A young man with gentle eyes and hands that seemed far too large for the tiny screws he twirled like thread. While he worked, he talked. A habit of people who sense someone else needs the noise. My grandmother raised me, he said, tightening a bolt with quiet confidence. She always told me, a woman isn't fragile, she's deliberate. I didn't understand it then. I do now. I smiled, a small one. A grateful one. She sounds wise. She is, he said. Then he glanced at me. You remind me of her. The words landed so softly, and yet they cracked something open inside me. I looked away before my throat betrayed me. When he finished, he handed me 2 new silver keys. Cold, clean, honest things. Light glinted off them like a promise. It'll feel different, he said quietly. Having something that's only yours. He was right. It did. After he left, I placed 1 key in my purse. The second in the little carved wooden box Peter made years ago. Back when love still felt like a shared future instead of a memory. The third I walked over and handed to my neighbor June. A widow with firm boundaries and softer eyes. For emergencies, I said. She didn't pry. Women who've walked through storms don't demand explanations. They just nod and stand beside you. By noon, I was standing inside the bank. The marble floors were polished so bright they reflected me. Not the woman I had been, but the woman I was becoming. Shoulders back. Steps steady. Eyes clear. A financial advisor guided me into an office lined with glass walls. The transparency felt ironic. What can I help you with today, Mrs. Clark? She asked. I want to remove all authorized users from my accounts. She checked her screen. You currently have 1 authorized user, your son Daniel Clark. Yes, I said. Remove him. Immediately. She hesitated, a reflex from people who assume all mothers exist only to forgive. But she saw something in my face. Because she straightened and simply nodded. Of course. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Would you like to set new passwords and security questions? Yes. Add additional notifications for activity? Yes. Place a privacy freeze so no one can request access without you being physically present. I looked her directly in the eyes. Yes. Something softened in her expression. I'm sorry, whatever brought you here must have been difficult. It was, I said. But necessary. When I stepped back outside, the air felt colder. Sharper. Like someone had opened a window inside my chest for the first time in years. The drive home was silent. Not the suffocating kind, but the kind that lets you hear your own heartbeat. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was simply aware. Of every year I had handed over pieces of myself. Of every apology I'd made for things that weren't my fault. Of every time I had waited to be remembered. Those days ended today. When I walked into my house, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I stopped, looked, and whispered to the woman staring back. You're not invisible. Not anymore. That evening, I baked a small loaf of bread. Nothing fancy. Just warmth, rising in a quiet kitchen. I ate it while it was still soft, butter melting faster than I could keep up. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't ache. It felt peaceful. Mine. But Miriam had no idea. Someone was about to knock on her newly locked door. And this time, she would choose. Not. It happened late the next afternoon. I was kneeling by my desk, organizing the drawer I had avoided for too long. Old birthday cards with fading ink. Receipts folded into tired little squares. And a photo of Daniel wearing the crooked paper crown he made in kindergarten. His smile in that picture. Wide, unguarded, pure. The kind of smile children forget how to make once the world teaches them pride. Sometimes I wonder if that little boy still exists somewhere inside the man he became. Or if he vanished quietly, without a goodbye. Then came the knock. Firm. Confident. Not angry, just entitled. The kind of knock from someone who believes doors open for them, because they always have. My heart didn't race. My breath didn't catch. Instead, something still and steady rose in me, like deep water settling. I stood, walked to the hallway, and looked through the peephole. Daniel. He looked older than the boy in the photo. Older even than the man I last saw across a crowded room pretending not to notice me. His hair was messy, his tie loose, his shoulders slightly folded inward, as if carrying weight he chose himself. For a moment, just a moment, a small, foolish part of me softened. Then I remembered. The laughter behind the door. The way he didn't stand. The toast to family, that somehow did not include the woman who sacrificed half her life, so he could build his. My hand drifted from the doorknob. Mom. His voice was muffled through the wood. Mom, I know you're in there. I said nothing. Silence, I'm learning, is not empty. It's a boundary. He waited. Then tried again. Mom, you changed the locks. Why would you do that? Because I needed to reclaim a home I had slowly handed over. Because I needed a moment of peace that wasn't dependent on someone else's convenience. Because I'm done being the fallback. The afterthought. The option. But I still said nothing. He sighed. The kind of exasperated sound grown children make when their aging parent dares to have a life outside their expectations. Elisa said you've been acting strange, he said. Blocking calls. Talking to lawyers. Are you upset about Sunday? You know how she gets when the house is full. She didn't mean anything. People love using exhaustion as an excuse for cruelty. His knock grew louder. Mom, just open the door. Please. I don't get what's happening. And I almost did. Almost. But almost is how mothers lose pieces of themselves. By opening doors they should have kept shut. So I stepped away from it. Quietly. Deliberately. After a long silence, his voice softened. I'm not trying to fight, he said. I just want to talk. There was a tremble. A familiar one. The same sound he made at age 7 when he broke his arm, and begged me not to be upset. But that little boy wasn't on my porch anymore. This was a man who had forgotten my worth until my absence reminded him. Minutes passed. Then I heard his footsteps retreat. A car door opened. Closed. Engine started. His headlights swept across my living room wall. A long pale stripe that looked like a goodbye he didn't even recognize as one. I waited 10 minutes before moving. Not because I was afraid. Because I was certain. The quiet he left behind didn't hurt. It soothed. I made tea chamomile, and sat at the table with Sylvia's instructions tucked beneath my notebook, the edges worn from my hands. I still had work to do. The next morning, I called my doctor's office. I'd like to update my medical directive, I said. Of course, the receptionist replied. Who should we list as your primary contact? I swallowed. My son Daniel Clark. Remove him from everything. Please. The silence on the line stretched, respectful. Understood, Mrs. Clark. We'll make the changes. After that, I went to the post office. Applied for a P.O. box. Declined all forwarding services. If anyone wanted to reach me, truly reach me, they would have to put in the effort. Not convenience, not assumption. Effort. When I arrived home, there was a small bag on my doorstep. I froze. Inside, a jar of honey, a small loaf of bread, and a handwritten note. Thought you might like these. Your kitchen always smelled like comfort. June. It wasn't pity. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't obligation. It was kindness. Simple. Quiet. Human. Funny how strangers sometimes offer more tenderness than blood. That night, I opened my journal. The pages smelled faintly of old ink and surrender. I wrote. Some people knock because they care. Some knock because they think they're owed entry. Today, I learned the difference. And while Miriam learned to guard her door, someone else, someone unexpected, was already finding their way back into her life. It was 3 days after Daniel's visit when the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Long enough that I almost didn't answer. Long enough to feel like telemarketers or a wrong dial. But something in me pressed accept. Grandma. My breath caught. Sophie. I hadn't heard my granddaughter's voice clearly in months. At gatherings she barely murmured hello. Like speaking to me was a task on a list she didn't remember writing. Yeah, it's me. Her voice was small, hesitant. Like someone standing at the edge of a confession. I sat down slowly. How did you get this number, sweetheart? A soft exhale. Dad left his old phone in the garage. Your number was saved under emergency only. She paused. I guess I decided it was an emergency. My heart tightened, not from fear, but from the truth in her tone. What's wrong? Her breath wavered. I'm sorry. For words no one else in that family had ever said to me without an explanation attached. For what, Sophie? For pretending you weren't there. At the grocery store. At the library. At school functions. Another breath. For walking past you like I didn't know you. Her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't rush to soothe her. I let her speak. I thought if I acted like Mom and Dad, they'd think I belonged. I didn't want to be the one who cared more about you than them. There it was. The truth I'd never asked for but had always known in some aching way. You're 16, I said gently. You were surviving in the only way you knew. She sniffed. It doesn't make it right. No, I agreed. But it makes you human. A long pause. Then, can I see you? My kitchen felt suddenly full. Of light, of breath, of possibility. When? I asked softly. Today. After school. Just me. No one knows I'm calling. I closed my eyes and let the silence hold us for a heartbeat. Yes, I whispered. Come. When the call ended, my hands trembled. Not with fear, but with something I hadn't felt in years. Being chosen. At exactly 4:17 p.m., the gate creaked. I stepped onto the porch. There she was, Sophie. Hood pulled over her head, backpack hanging off one shoulder, eyes swollen but determined. She looked up at me like she was waiting to see if I'd turn her away. I opened my arms. She walked straight into them, not hesitating, not thinking, just folding into me the way she used to when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. After a long moment, she pulled back and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. Oh, my dear, I said softly. You are the one person whose absence hurt differently. She dropped her gaze. Mom said you're doing all this for attention. Dad thinks you're mad at him. She exhaled. But none of that felt true. Not after I thought about how you left last Sunday. Holding your dish like it was the only piece of comfort you had left. My throat tightened. She looked at me again, eyes wide and honest. I know what it feels like to be invisible. Those words from her sliced through me with gentle precision. She wasn't just apologizing. She was confessing a shared ache. We went inside. I made tea. She took the same chair she used to climb into with her feet tucked under her. I served banana bread. Homemade, warm and perfect. She smiled softly. This tastes like childhood. We talked about school. Her drawings. The pressure she felt to fit the shape her parents carved. And then very quietly she asked, Am I allowed to still be part of your life? Even if they're not? I reached across the table and held her hand. You are allowed to choose the people who make you feel seen. Her eyes glistened. Then I choose you, she whispered. When she left, she hugged me tighter than she ever had. I watched her walk down the sidewalk until she turned the corner. Then I stepped back inside my home and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not hope. Not forgiveness. Not even healing. Something simpler. Belonging. But Sophie's visit wouldn't stay secret for long. And the day her parents found out, everything in Miriam's world shifted again. Sophie's visit lingered in the house like sunlight caught in dust, warm, quiet, impossible to ignore. Her laughter still echoed softly in the hall. Her small footprint pressed into the rug near the door. A mark that said, she was here, and she mattered. For the first time in years, I woke up not feeling like an obligation, but a destination. But good things, especially in families where silence has been louder than love, never last long. It was Thursday evening. I sat with my tea, leafing through a gardening magazine that smelled faintly of soil and summer, when a screech of tires cut the quiet. Too fast. Too loud. My chest dropped before I even stood. I knew that sound. Daniel's temper always traveled with him. The knock at the door wasn't a knock. It was a battering. Open the door right now. I closed the magazine slowly, my fingers lingering on the page as if it were a talisman. Calm. No fear. Just readiness. Through the peephole, I saw them all, Daniel, Elisa, and Sophie. Her shoulders stiff, her eyes red, carrying guilt that should have belonged to no one her age. I opened the door only halfway. That was enough. Elisa, I said, my voice even. Daniel. He lunged forward, but the chain caught loudly, like the snap of a rope between worlds. You talked to Sophie behind our backs? He demanded. Watch your tone, I replied quietly. He blinked, startled, unprepared for a mother who met anger with boundaries instead of bows. Elisa stepped forward, face flushed. How dare you interfere in our home? In our child? Sophie flinched, small and afraid. I reached out, she whispered. She didn't do anything wrong. Elisa snapped, harsh and quick. You're 16, Sophie. You don't make those decisions alone. I raised a brow. You seem very upset for someone who hasn't allowed her daughter to visit her grandmother in over a year. Elisa's jaw tightened. Because you encourage disobedience. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Softly, disbelievingly, a sound that shook the edge of their anger. Your daughter came to me because she needed a safe place to speak. You should ask yourselves why she couldn't do that at home. Daniel's face darkened. Mom, listen, we know about the lawyers. We know you're removing us from everything. You didn't even tell us. You didn't ask, I said simply. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he inherited from his father, frustration written in every line of his face. This is insane, he muttered. You're shutting us out. No, Daniel. I corrected, voice soft but unwavering. I'm shutting out ungratefulness. I'm shutting out disrespect. I'm shutting out neglect. He stared at me, a stranger in the reflection of the woman who raised him. Mom, you raised me better than this, he whispered, cracking at the edges. I did, I said gently. But somewhere along the way, you chose comfort over kindness. And you expected me to accept the consequences of your choices. He opened his mouth, closed it, found no script. Sophie stepped forward then, small but deliberate. Grandma, please don't be mad at me. I softened immediately. Sweetheart, I could never be mad at you. Elisa grabbed her arm, sharp and instinctive. Get back here. Sophie pulled away firm. No. I'm speaking. The air stilled. I want to see her, she said, voice steady. She listens. She cares. She doesn't pretend to be busy when I talk. Elisa's face burned with humiliation. Daniel stared at the floor. And in that moment, truth seeped into the cracks, filling the space where fear and anger had lived too long. Sophie wasn't choosing sides. She was choosing respect. Mom, Daniel said again, quieter this time. Can we just come in? Talk. No, I said, gentle but firm. Not today. His eyes widened. You can't shut your door in our faces, Elisa snapped. I smiled sadly. Actually, I can. I have new locks. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Daniel's voice trembled. So that's it? You're done with us. I'm done, I said softly, being the only one trying. Sophie swallowed, tears gathering quietly, but her gaze remained unwavering. Can I still visit even if they don't? I looked into the eyes that mirrored his as a child. You and I will always choose each other, I said. Whenever you need me, my door opens for you. Elisa let out a bitter breath. Daniel said nothing. Sophie mouthed a small, urgent thank you before they pulled her away. I closed the door slowly. No guilt. No regret. Only truth. But Daniel wasn't finished. And what he tried next would push Miriam toward a decision no one, least of all her own family, could have imagined. For a few days after the confrontation, the street outside my house stayed unnervingly quiet. No cars slowing down. No sudden knocks. No angry footsteps on my porch. Almost peaceful. But peace is fragile when guilt demands attention. It was Saturday morning when the letter arrived. A thick envelope, my name scrawled in handwriting I recognized instantly, Daniel's. Heavy, precise, like every word weighed obligation. Inside were papers. Legal papers. My hands trembled, not with fear, but disbelief. The first line. Petition for temporary guardianship for health and financial management. He was trying to take control of my life. Of me. He claimed I was emotionally unstable, acting irrationally, influenced by outside individuals. He even wrote about concerns regarding cognitive decline. Cognitive decline. As if I couldn't recognize the selfishness in my own son. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that ricocheted off the walls. The last page was a request. To prevent the respondent, Miriam Clark, from making further legal changes until evaluation. He thought he could stop me. He thought he could force the door open after I closed it. He thought he could own the mother he had abandoned. I set the papers down. Breathed. Slow. Steady. Then I called Sylvia. She didn't sound surprised. Just disappointed. He filed for guardianship, I said. Her inhale was sharp. He's trying to claim you're incapable of managing your own life. I know. This is control disguised as concern, she said firmly. A common tactic. I whispered, he's my son. And you're a person, she countered. A person with rights he cannot strip away. Her voice became steel. Miriam, we will fight this. And we will win. I felt tears prick, hot, angry, exhausted, but I held them back. Come by my office, she continued. Today. Bring everything. At Sylvia's house, Murphy the cat hissed at the envelope, as if even he sensed the ugliness inside it. Sylvia sifted through the documents, her expression hardening by the minute. He lied, she muttered. Half of these claims are fabricated. But lies only win when the truth stays quiet. She slid a form toward me. This is your response. Sign it now, I'll file Monday morning. I picked up the pen. My hand paused. Not because I doubted myself, but because part of me mourned what this all represented. A son who would rather control me than understand me. A daughter-in-law who saw independence as defiance. A family built on expectation instead of love. Sylvia touched my wrist gently. You're not choosing to fight against your son, she said softly. You're choosing to fight for yourself. I nodded. I signed. That night, in my living room, the new locks gleamed quietly, like guardians standing watch. I stared at my reflection in the window. A woman with lines etched by decades of giving. A woman with hands that trembled not from weakness, but from carrying others for too long. A woman rediscovering her own strength. I whispered to the empty room. I am still here. And I choose me. The next morning, I walked to the mailbox, ready to send the response. But I stopped. Not from doubt. Not from fear. Something simpler. Clarity. I realized fighting wasn't enough. I needed distance. Space. A life outside the shadow of people who only remembered me when it suited them. I made a decision. A quiet, stunning, inevitable decision. I walked back inside, pulled out a suitcase, and began to pack. Not to run. Not to hide. To start over. To live. To reclaim everything they forgot I once had. Dreams. Voice. Freedom. And in the final act, Miriam's departure will shake her family to its core, forcing them to face the one truth they never imagined. That the woman they thought they owned had never belonged to anyone but herself. I packed slowly, deliberately. Dresses, my journal, Peter's old compass, the carved box with my spare key. Everything else stayed behind. By midday, my suitcase waited by the door like a quiet sentinel. On the kitchen table, I left a note. Not for Daniel, not for Elisa. For me. You chose yourself. Remember this. The sun cut across the living room, golden and sharp. I stepped outside. Locked the door. Slid the key into my purse. The street was still. Too still. Until a car skidded into my driveway. Daniel. He jumped out, face pale, breath uneven. Mom, what are you doing? I'm leaving, I said simply. His laugh was raw, fractured. Leaving? You can't, this is insane. I've never been more serious, I replied. He stepped closer. Where will you go? Ahead, I said. His eyes darted, searching for a way to undo what he'd already done. This is because of the guardianship thing, isn't it? Mom, I didn't mean. You meant every word. I cut in. You tried to own me. My choices. My life. He swallowed. I was worried about you. Worried people ask questions. Controlling people file petitions. My voice didn't shake. His did. Mom, please. Don't leave. I looked at him. Not the man who filed papers and demanded control, but the boy who hid under blankets during storms, who cried when his goldfish died, who danced barefoot in my kitchen. That boy would have never tried to cage me. You didn't lose me today, Daniel, I said softly. You lost me years ago. Today, I just stopped pretending. His face twisted with grief. I can change. Maybe you can, I said gently. But I cannot stay shrinking myself while waiting for that change. He reached for my suitcase. I pulled it back, firm, unwavering. Then a car door opened. Sophie. Eyes wide, not fearful, but knowing. Grandma, she whispered. I opened my arms. She ran into them, sobbing silently. Not to stop me, but because she finally understood what it meant to lose something precious. When she pulled back, I cupped her face. You are not losing me. You're watching me choose myself. Can I call you? Visit you? You can always choose me. And I will always choose you. Behind her, Daniel crumbled. Elisa didn't even leave the car. Expected. I placed my hands on Sophie's shoulders. You are the one who saw me before it was too late. Hold on to that. She nodded, strong despite the tears. I walked to the taxi, placed my suitcase in the trunk, opened the passenger door. Daniel called again, voice ragged. Mom, just tell me where you're going. I turned, once, letting the wind carry the words like a soft promise, to a life that doesn't wait for anyone's permission. I slid into the taxi. The driver asked, destination? I smiled, looking back at the house that had once been my world. Somewhere new. The city unfolded before me, vast and unclaimed. For the first time in decades, the world didn't feel heavy. It felt open, free. I belonged wholly to me. And as the taxi disappeared into the horizon, the house stood empty, quiet, waiting. A family left behind, forced to confront a truth they'd never imagined. The woman they thought they owned had chosen herself instead. And nothing would ever be the same.